The mockery in Commissioner Rick Martinez's voice echoed across Interstate 45 as he examined what he was certain was a counterfeit FBI badge. The woman standing beside her modest Honda Civic remained unnaturally calm, her hands folded patiently, as Martinez held up the credentials for his officers to see. "Folks, this is what desperation looks like," he announced loudly enough for nearby drivers to hear. "Federal Bureau of Investigation, Special Operations Division." His laugh was sharp and dismissive. "Lady, I've seen better fakes at Halloween stores." From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If you enjoy stories about extraordinary people hiding in plain sight, consider subscribing for more tales of justice served when least expected. But to understand what happened on Interstate 45 that Sunday afternoon, we need to go back 18 months earlier. The explosion in the federal courthouse in Houston had killed 3 people and wounded 17 others. FBI Special Agent Sarah Chen stood in the debris-filled hallway, her ears still ringing from the blast, blood trickling from a cut on her forehead. Around her, emergency responders worked frantically to extract survivors from the rubble. "Sarah!" Assistant Director Morrison's voice cut through the chaos. "We need you in the command center. Now." She followed him through the maze of emergency vehicles to a mobile command unit that had been hastily set up in the courthouse parking lot. Inside, a dozen agents huddled around computer screens displaying surveillance footage, phone records, and financial data. "The Castellano organization," Morrison began without preamble. "We've been trying to penetrate their network for 5 years. This bombing wasn't random. They were destroying evidence in 3 ongoing federal cases." Sarah studied the files he handed her. The Castellano crime family had evolved beyond traditional organized crime, diversifying into cybercrime, money laundering, and political corruption. Their network extended throughout Texas, with tentacles reaching into law enforcement, judiciary, and local government. "What do you need from me?" she asked. "Deep cover. 18 months minimum. We need someone inside their operation, someone who can get close to the decision-makers." Sarah looked around the command center, at the agents working frantically to piece together the bombing evidence. "What's my legend?" "Insurance fraud investigator. Perfect cover for someone who needs to ask questions, examine financial records, meet with various businesses. The Castellanos run dozens of legitimate front companies, auto dealerships, construction firms, restaurants. An insurance investigator would have natural reasons to interact with all of them." Morrison handed her another folder. "Your new identity. Sarah Chen, independent insurance fraud specialist. You'll be living in Pearland, Texas, driving a Honda Civic, shopping at Target, living the most boring middle-class life imaginable." "And my extraction timeline?" Morrison's expression grew grim. "When we have enough evidence to dismantle their entire network. Could be 18 months, could be 3 years. Are you willing?" Sarah looked out the window at the destroyed courthouse, at the body bags being loaded into ambulances. "When do I start?" Now, standing beside Interstate 45 with Commissioner Martinez examining her credentials with obvious suspicion, Sarah reflected on how successfully she had become invisible. 18 months of suburban anonymity, of grocery shopping and oil changes, and Sunday visits to her fictional mother's house. 18 months of building the perfect cover while slowly, carefully mapping the Castellano organization's structure. What Commissioner Martinez couldn't know was that her Honda Civic contained sophisticated surveillance equipment hidden in the dashboard. Her seemingly ordinary purse held recording devices that had captured dozens of incriminating conversations. Her weekly routine had been carefully constructed to bring her into contact with low-level Castellano associates who saw her as exactly what she appeared to be, a harmless insurance adjuster. But what happened next would change everything, not just for Commissioner Martinez, but for the entire Castellano investigation that Sarah had spent 18 months building. Because sometimes the most dangerous moment in any undercover operation isn't when criminals discover your identity. It's when local law enforcement does. Martinez was examining her FBI credentials with growing skepticism, unaware that less than 2 miles away, Vincent Castellano Jr. was having lunch at his favorite Italian restaurant. Vincent, who had been one of Sarah's primary surveillance targets for the past 6 months. Vincent, who would inevitably hear about this very public confrontation with local police. And Vincent, who would start asking questions about the woman he'd seen around the neighbourhood for the past year and a half. Detective Sarah Chen, 42 years old, had been driving the same route to her fictional mother's house every Sunday for 3 years of operational planning and 18 months of actual deployment. Her silver Honda Civic was unremarkable, bearing the wear of carefully manufactured normalcy. Her appearance matched the car, business casual attire that suggested middle management, perhaps an insurance adjuster or regional sales coordinator. Nothing about her suggested federal authority or specialized training. That anonymity had been carefully cultivated, not just over the past decade of her FBI career, but specifically for this operation. Commissioner Martinez was conducting what he called a community visibility patrol along this stretch of highway, a monthly exercise designed to demonstrate police presence and, if he was honest, to generate the kind of arrests that looked good in department statistics. At 54, Martinez had built his reputation on being tough, uncompromising, and highly quotable during press conferences. He'd been featured on 2 reality police shows and had authored a book titled No Excuses, Law Enforcement. When his patrol unit's lights had flashed behind Sarah's Honda, she had pulled over with the practiced efficiency of someone familiar with law enforcement procedures. Too familiar, perhaps, though Martinez hadn't noticed. Her documents were in order, her registration current, her inspection sticker valid. There was no legitimate reason for the traffic stop, but Martinez had developed an instinct for people who seemed out of place in his jurisdiction. "Mom," Martinez had begun, his tone carrying the weight of assumed authority, "I'm going to need you to step out of the vehicle for a routine safety inspection." Sarah complied without question, her movements deliberate but cooperative. She locked her car, pocketed the keys, and stood with her hands visible, displaying the kind of body language that suggested either complete innocence or extensive training in de-escalation techniques. Martinez circled her vehicle, ostensibly checking for violations but actually performing for the small audience of stopped traffic that had begun to form. His officers, Sergeant Lopez and Officer Williams, had taken positions that suggested they expected trouble, though neither could articulate exactly what kind. "You seem nervous," Martinez observed, though Sarah's expression remained completely neutral. "Not nervous, Commissioner," she replied, her voice steady. "Just wondering about the reason for the stop." The use of his title caught Martinez off guard momentarily. Most civilians called him officer or sir. Commissioner suggested she knew something about police hierarchy, which immediately raised his suspicion level. "Routine traffic safety," he replied curtly. "Now, I'm going to need to see some additional identification beyond your driver's license." This was where the interaction had taken its crucial turn. Sarah had reached into her jacket's inner pocket with the slow, deliberate movement of someone trained to avoid startling armed officers. What she withdrew was a leather credential case containing the FBI badge and identification that Martinez was now examining with increasing skepticism. "Federal Bureau of Investigation," Martinez read aloud, his voice dripping with disbelief. "Special Operations Division, Agent Sarah Chen." He looked up at her, then back at the credentials. "You know what bothers me about this lady?" Sarah remained silent, which Martinez interpreted as an admission of guilt. "What bothers me is that you're driving a beat-up Honda, wearing clothes from Target, and you think you're going to convince me you're some kind of federal super agent." His voice rose as he warmed to his theme. "FBI agents don't look like soccer moms. They don't drive economy cars, and they sure as hell don't get nervous during routine traffic stops." The gathering crowd of onlookers, mostly other drivers who had been forced to slow down due to the police activity, watched with the fascination that Americans reserve for public confrontations with authority. Several had begun recording with their phones, sensing that this interaction might be heading somewhere interesting. Officer Williams, younger and less experienced than his colleagues, shifted uncomfortably. Something about the woman's demeanor bothered him, though he couldn't articulate exactly what. She wasn't displaying the signs of guilt or fear that he'd learned to recognize during his police academy training. Instead, she seemed to be waiting for something. "Commissioner," Williams said quietly, stepping closer to Martinez. Maybe we should run the credentials through federal verification before. Before what? Martinez snapped. Before we waste taxpayer money verifying what any idiot can see is a fake badge? Look at her, Williams. Does she look like FBI material to you? The question hung in the air, and Sarah Chen finally spoke. Appearances, she said softly, can be deceiving. Martinez's face flushed with irritation. Oh, now she's going to lecture me about police work. Lady, I've been doing this job since before you learned to drive. I know a fake badge when I see one, and I know a desperate person trying to talk their way out of trouble. He handed the credentials to Sergeant Lopez. Book her for impersonating a federal officer. That's a felony charge that should get her some real thinking time. As Lopez moved forward with handcuffs, Sarah made no move to resist. Instead, she reached into her other pocket and withdrew a single item, a basic smartphone with an unusual blue case. I need to make one phone call, she said calmly. Martinez laughed harshly. You'll get your phone call at the station, sweetheart. Right now you're under arrest for... Sarah had already dialed. The call connected after one ring. This is Agent Chen, she said clearly enough for everyone to hear. Authorization code Nightfall 77 Delta. I have a situation on Interstate 45, mile marker 237. Local law enforcement interference with federal operations. She listened for a moment, then responded. Understood, ETA? After hanging up, she turned to Martinez. Commissioner, I recommend you contact your chief of police immediately. You have approximately 12 minutes to resolve this situation before it escalates beyond your control. The confidence in her voice gave Martinez pause for the first time. There was something in her tone that suggested she wasn't making empty threats. It carried the kind of authority that came from being accustomed to obedience. What kind of game are you playing? He demanded. No game, Commissioner. Just consequences. Sergeant Lopez looked uncertainly between his superior and the woman they were about to arrest. Sir, maybe we should check with dispatch about any federal operations in the area. Martinez's jaw tightened. His authority was being questioned in public, in front of phone cameras and witnesses. Every instinct told him to double down, to assert control, to demonstrate that nobody, fake federal agent or not, was going to intimidate him on his highway. She stays under arrest, he declared. I don't care what kind of performance she's putting on. Federal agents carry proper identification, drive government vehicles, and don't get pulled over during routine traffic stops. Sarah checked her watch. 11 minutes, Commissioner. The next several minutes passed with mounting tension. Martinez ordered his officers to continue with the arrest procedure, but both Lopez and Williams seemed increasingly hesitant. Something about Sarah's calm demeanor was affecting them. She wasn't acting like someone caught in a desperate lie. She was acting like someone waiting for backup. Other drivers had begun to exit their vehicles, drawn by curiosity and the sense that they were witnessing something unusual. The traffic backup was growing, and Martinez knew that meant increased visibility and potential media attention. Under normal circumstances, he would welcome the publicity. Today, something felt different. At exactly 12 minutes after Sarah's phone call, the distant sound of helicopter rotors became audible over the highway noise. Martinez looked up, squinting against the afternoon sun. The aircraft approaching was clearly military or federal, sleek, fast, and flying with the kind of precision that suggested official business rather than news media or traffic reporting. Probably just a routine patrol, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. The helicopter circled once, then began to descend toward a clear area beside the highway. As it landed, the distinctive markings became visible. FBI in large white letters against the dark blue fuselage. From the helicopter emerged 4 figures in tactical gear, moving with the disciplined efficiency of a federal response team. Behind them walked a 5th figure in a dark suit, his bearing and age suggesting senior authority. The man in the suit approached the group with purposeful strides, his credentials already visible in his hand. When he was close enough to be heard over the residual helicopter noise, he called out clearly, "I'm Assistant Director James Morrison, FBI Special Operations. I'm looking for Agent Sarah Chen." The highway had fallen almost completely quiet, with drivers and passengers alike watching this unprecedented scene unfold. Martinez felt the ground shifting beneath his feet, but his pride wouldn't allow him to back down immediately. "I don't know who you people are," he began, but this woman was driving with... The tactical team began loading equipment back into the helicopter, their movements efficient and professional. Morrison handed Martinez a business card. "When your chief calls my office, make sure he mentions case file November 7 Alpha. Someone will explain the implications of today's interference." As the federal agents prepared to depart, Sarah finally removed her handcuffs, which Lopez had never actually secured. She walked to her Honda, retrieved a small bag from the trunk, and approached the helicopter. Before boarding, she turned back to Martinez. "Commissioner, next time you encounter credentials you're not familiar with, verification takes 2 minutes. Assumptions can destroy careers." The helicopter lifted off, leaving Martinez standing beside Interstate 45 with his officers, a crowd of witnesses, and the growing realization that his world had just fundamentally changed. Sergeant Lopez was the first to speak. "Commissioner, should I call the chief?" Martinez stared at the disappearing helicopter, then at the business card in his hand. "Assistant Director James Morrison, FBI Special Operations Division." The phone number was followed by an extension marked Emergency Response Coordination. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Call the chief. Tell him we need to talk immediately." But what Commissioner Martinez didn't know, what he couldn't know, was that his public arrest of Agent Sarah Chen had just triggered something far more dangerous than federal embarrassment. Because at that very moment, 2 miles away at Castellano's Italian restaurant, Vincent Jr. was finishing his Sunday lunch when his phone buzzed with a video message. The video showed a familiar woman, a woman he'd seen around the neighborhood for months, a woman he'd dismissed as just another suburban nobody, being confronted by police as an FBI agent. Vincent's face went white as he recognized her. The insurance lady, the one who'd been asking questions about the auto dealership, the one who'd somehow always ended up in the same places as their business meetings. "Tony," Vincent called to his lieutenant across the restaurant. "We have a problem, a big one." The investigation that had taken 18 months to build was about to unravel in 18 hours. As the crowd began to disperse and traffic resumed its normal flow, Martinez found himself replaying every detail of the encounter. Sarah Chen's calm demeanor, her precise language, her lack of surprise when the helicopter arrived. Everything pointed to someone who had expected exactly what had happened. What Martinez couldn't understand was why she seemed almost disappointed. Not angry, not vindictive, but genuinely disappointed that events had unfolded this way, as if his interference had cost her something far more valuable than a few minutes of time. Officer Williams approached cautiously. "Sir, what do we put in our reports?" Martinez considered the question. His report would be read by his chief, by internal affairs, possibly by federal investigators, and certainly by lawyers. Every word would be scrutinized for evidence of profiling, misconduct, or poor judgment. "The truth," he said finally. "We document exactly what happened and why we made the decisions we did." But as he walked back to his patrol car, Martinez understood that the truth wasn't going to be enough to save his career. He had publicly arrested a federal agent based on his assumptions about what federal agents should look like. He had dismissed proper verification procedures in favor of his own prejudices, and he had done it all in front of cameras that would ensure the incident became public knowledge. His radio crackled to life. "Commissioner Martinez, please contact Chief Rodriguez immediately. Priority 1. Martinez keyed the radio. "Understood. En route to station." As he drove back to headquarters, Martinez couldn't shake the image of Sarah Chen's calm expression as she made her phone call. She had known exactly what would happen next. She had known that help was 12 minutes away. She had known that her credentials were authentic, and that his assumptions would be proven wrong in the most public way possible. The question that would haunt him was whether she had planned it that way. Had she allowed herself to be pulled over, knowing it would lead to this confrontation? Had the entire incident been orchestrated to teach him a lesson about profiling and assumptions? The secure conference room at FBI Houston field office was filled with grim faces. Assistant Director Morrison sat at the head of the table, surrounded by case agents who had worked the Castellano investigation for years. On the main screen, surveillance footage showed Vincent Castellano Jr. and his associates in heated discussion at the restaurant, their body language suggesting alarm and rapid decision-making. "The operation is blown," Morrison announced. "Our surveillance indicates they've identified Agent Chen and are conducting damage assessment on their entire network." Agent Rodriguez, who had been Sarah's handler, spoke up. 18 months of work. We were 3 weeks away from grand jury indictments, 3 weeks from rolling up the entire organization. Morrison's expression was stone cold as he addressed the room. "Commissioner Martinez's traffic stop has cost us the most significant organized crime investigation in Texas history. The Castellanos are already moving assets, destroying evidence, and relocating key personnel." On the screen, new footage showed moving trucks at 3 Castellano business locations. The family was executing a pre-planned emergency dispersal protocol that would take months to track and counter. "What about Agent Chen?" asked Agent Thompson. "Extracted safely, but her cover identity is completely compromised. She'll need full identity reconstruction before she can return to operational status." Morrison closed the file folder in front of him with deliberate finality. "Ladies and gentlemen, 18 months of work destroyed by one traffic stop. Let's discuss damage control and how we rebuild this investigation from scratch." Commissioner Rick Martinez sat in his lawyer's office, reviewing termination papers and discussing potential federal civil rights violations. The video of his confrontation with Agent Chen had gone viral, making him a national symbol of law enforcement prejudice and incompetence. Chief Rodriguez had been forced to issue a public apology to the FBI and announce a complete review of the department's training protocols. 2 city council members had called for Martinez's resignation, and the mayor had distanced himself from the incident entirely. But the cost wasn't just Martinez's career. The Castellano crime family, warned by his public exposure of Agent Chen, had successfully dismantled their Texas operations and relocated to Florida, taking their criminal enterprise beyond the reach of the investigators who had spent nearly 2 years building cases against them. 3 people who might have testified against the organization had disappeared. Evidence that might have led to dozens of convictions had been destroyed. A network of corruption that reached into multiple levels of government remained intact and operational, just in a different state. All because a police commissioner looked at a woman in a Honda Civic and decided she couldn't possibly be what her credentials said she was. The most expensive traffic stop in FBI history had taught everyone involved a lesson they would never forget. Assumptions don't just embarrass, sometimes they destroy justice itself.